Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Time for a midweek update as we look at these crypto markets. Bitcoin, green, strong recovery from the little sell-off that we saw on Monday. Good action, green across the board. Just many of these big cap alts are now participating, which is very good news. You generally want to see some leading on the way up with some of the big cap names if Bitcoin is showing some strength. Even Monday and yesterday, it was primarily most of the small cap names. A lot of them were just kind of quick pumps out of nowhere, but late yesterday and today we're starting to see broader participation in some of the big cap names. On the leaderboard here, EOS up 18% here in the last 24 hours. Cardano is strong at 11%, and just good action across the board. Green as Bitcoin once again is testing that breakout points. And so we'll take a look at the big cap names here. Let's start with Bitcoin first. Looking at the charts here, I'm going to start with the daily chart because it's important to keep an eye on the big picture, as I always say. And you can see here this broader uptrend that's been in place really since mid-Feb has continued to maintain. This little last shakeout we saw here was, to be honest, looking pretty bearish here. It was starting to make lower lows and was barely holding up, but very quickly recovered and looking pretty good there. Held that trend line, did breach the 22 EMA for a brief period, but today showing some good relative strength. On the way up here, near-term resistance is that big reversal bar that we saw here on March 21st. The high of that day was basically $4,060. So looking at that on the way up, and then of course the breakout point here just above 4,100, and that's really been the major resistance level going back to December. And so a break above this would be very bullish. I was looking at this action here going into the week as we were now 5 consecutive green weeks in a row, and I was thinking, I would rather not see a breakout from this point because it would look a little exhausted, and that would be a little bit of an exhaustion buying potential, maybe a failed breakout. And I was posting in the Slack group saying it'd be better if there was a little bit of a pullback and test support and then a strong rally up from there, as that would kind of cool things off a little bit. And we're starting to see a little bit of that. So I'm really liking this action here. The recovery is helping. What I was looking at here, if we go to the 4-hour chart, yesterday prices were still below this near-term support that gave way. You can see it was a quick shakedown right to that trend line. And really what I was looking for was a recapture of that resistance, basically around that 39.60 level. And we saw that with some pretty good conviction. Prices went back to 4K and have so far been kind of just sitting tight, consolidating a little bit, which is needed considering how strong of a move that was, and just kind of sitting tight around that 4K level. And so all in all, good action, like what I'm seeing here. We want to see this maintained, but on the way down, it's going to be important to maintain that 39.60 level. So that's really the first support to be watching, and then below that, basically 3,900. On the way up, first resistance, again 4,060, and then this breakout point just above 4,100. So all in all, the trend is in favor of the bulls. The trend remains. Good to see that action. The moving averages are still moving upward. Price again yesterday was a little shaky, but looking much better here today. And the good news is many of the alts, the big cap names, are leading the way up, which is generally what you want to see. So very quickly looking at names like Cardano, very strong action. This was a nice little pause, pull back, let things consolidate a little bit, getting up there again, approaching my next target around that 1700 on the BTC side. If we look at Cardano from the USD tether pair, even stronger action. If we zoom in here a little bit, you can see this is a little bit of a breakout, hit that first target I was looking at, nice pullback entry, and then breaking higher again. So all in all, looking pretty good. The trend remains in favor of the bulls there. EOS, big winner on the last 24 hours. Nice spike higher. Hit both of my targets that I was looking for on this first move. Ultimate target was basically that last swing high back here. You can see we just breached that as I record this, pulling back here a little bit. It is extended near term on the shorter time frames. The 4-hour chart, you can see RSI peaked right around 90. If you go to the 1-hour chart, showing some bearish divergence during that last little spike higher, but a healthy consolidation here would be good. Let things cool off a little bit and setting up another leg up on the daily chart, which is still looking very strong. Like the volume that came in there, that's very important when you see a big breakout. The volume is key there. And so I have been scaling out of this one a little bit and taking some profits here. I was into this one over the weekend as it was starting to pop here. Mentioned this one and looking at that support level, was really wanting to see a break of this trend line. We started to see that over the weekend, so I started to jump in, and then yesterday and today as it's starting to pop out, decided to get out of the way here. This is where I entered and just kind of held. It was kind of sitting tight, didn't really do much after it broke out from that trend line, but then we saw that big break higher yesterday. So EOS still looking pretty good. If we look at EOS from the US dollar pair here, looking at USD tether, again elevated. Target on the upside from this perspective was basically around that 440 mark, and it came pretty close. $4.33, 34 cents was my first target on that one. So that one's pretty good. Nice little breakout here as well. The big picture still looking very bullish. If we go to that big picture chart, you can see this kind of just hit resistance here. Again, best case would be let this sit tight here for a little bit, kind of pause. But the momentum is in favor of the bulls. The volume's kicking in, so it could certainly just keep going before it takes a decent breather. So looking at another one here, Bitcoin Cash has been looking surprisingly strong here. If we look at it from BTC pair, I mentioned this one in the live stream over the Friday when it was pulling back. It's kind of still heading up here, marching, stair-stepping its way higher, making a series of higher lows. So far so good. I'm liking the action here, trending higher along the moving averages. Still looking pretty good. Finding a little bit of resistance here. If you look at this one, right around that 0.042 on the BTC pair, that'd be the next breakout point for another leg on the upside. Looking at it from the USD pair, let me go to Coinbase, Bitcoin Cash USD. You can see very similar action here, kind of vacillating in and around that 160 level, right now at 167 basically, and finding a little bit of near-term resistance right at that point here around that 170 mark. So see how it consolidates, but still looking pretty good in the big picture. Volume is coming in as it's starting to trend higher. So one to keep an eye on here. Litecoin has been sitting very tight for quite some time and is setting up for a little bit of a breakout. So one to keep an eye on here. Litecoin BTC pair, look at how tight that's been sitting basically since taking a pause here. I mean, it peaked out on March 16th, but really has been topped out really since the early part of March after a very strong run in February, and just kind of sitting tight, letting these moving averages catch up. So one to keep an eye on here. Things have certainly paused long enough to let these indicators cool off. You can see the RSI's pulled back, the MACD's pulled back, starting to tick higher a little bit, and it's paused right below that major resistance point. If you look back here in March through July or June is really where that big base that finally gave way. Saw the big pullback, fully retraced that, now just kind of sitting tight right under that resistance point. So one to certainly keep an eye on here. Ontology, looking at ONT BTC pair. I was watching this one, looking pretty good from two perspectives here. Let me zoom in on the 4-hour view for us. Sorry about all my jumping around here. But looking at the lower trend line first, this has been in place basically since that mid-February point. And look at how consistent that support has come in every time it's touched that line. And so it's unusual to see it that almost perfect, but very nice trend line, very strong. And this last little bit here where I'm pointing the arrow to was also horizontal resistance, which was the breakout point that we saw on March 20th. Had that big breakout, pulling right back, and found support almost exactly right at that point, starting to bounce right off it. So if you missed that initial breakout, these little secondary entries, these throwbacks, make some ideal entries. That's what I look for. Those are good risk reward entries because you don't have to give much room to the downside if it decides to break below that support, and especially since it was holding this trend line, just a confluence of support, something to keep an eye on when you see that set up. Very nice. I'd like to see another pullback here, maybe a higher low, an area to add to it, and then it get going here. But all in all, Ontology is looking pretty good from that perspective. Looking at some of the small cap names, there's been quite a few little pumps. If you look at names like Enigma, took a quick trade on that one yesterday. It was just like a quick scalp trade, and really these have been on the 5-minute charts. You can see these big spikes, and yes, we're looking at 5-minute charts here, but look at how big these moves are. 21% right there, you know, that's 23% right here, 25% right there. Incredible moves in such a very short period of time. And really that's how I trade these, just because they're so volatile, but the volume is there. That's the key. Many of the names, the small cap names, do this, but they're just not liquid enough to very easily get in and out of without having significant slippage, that sort of thing. But this one it was a volume leader yesterday, so one to keep an eye on. It looks like it's pulling back here right to support, so I'll be watching this one again for another potential quick trade. But you're seeing a lot of those setting up right now. Knowles is one. Quick spike. Again, we're looking at the 5-minute charts here, so very short-term time frames. And again, this is more for like day trading. That's how I treat these. The other charts, when I'm looking at 1-hour, 4-hour views, I'm generally swing trading those, holding those for a couple of days at least, if not longer. on this view here, this is generally a quick trade. I'm in it for a couple of hours max, and that's just a 5-minute chart here, just scalping and taking profits on the momentum as they break out. So one to keep an eye on here, Cellular Seller Network was one I was watching yesterday. It was a newer listing here on Binance. You can see this was the kind of initial exchange debut here. Here's the 15-minute chart. Looked like it had put in a pretty good low here. Was watching this one yesterday as it popped, made a new higher low right here, and has had a pretty good run here today. So it looked like it's just a little bit of a bounce, a retracement bounce, but still 34% on that little bit of a bounce end to end. I didn't catch that entire move. It was just, again, a quick little scalp, but nonetheless, the volume was there. Newer listing. We'll see where that one goes. It's kind of a newer name on the exchange, one to keep an eye on here. And last but not least, and really one of the most important ones I'm watching here, is this ETH BTC pair. Watching this broader daily chart form this big symmetrical pattern here, and the price range is really starting to tighten up here on this daily pair, and there's a confluence of support starting to form here. The first is this little trend line that potentially is being established here. We've had 2 touches to it here. The first one here back in December, and then again right here in early mid-Feb. And now we're looking at it potentially holding again. In this particular instance, also lines up with this horizontal price support, which I have highlighted here. Now you could argue this is a little bit of a descending triangle forming. It's really starting to constrict here, really starting to wedge out. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of days. But I'm watching this for a potential breakout to the upside. If ETH BTC can start moving off of this support level, especially with some strong volume, that's going to put a lot more confidence in the general altcoin markets, and I'm going to be looking for some stronger reactions across the board in the alt space, especially if ETH is leading on the way up. And that could also be an early indicator that maybe Bitcoin is ready to look to break out above that 4,200 level that we've been seeing as resistance since December. So that's one I'm keeping an eye on here. I'm liking this is setting up here. Certainly could just easily break to the downside. That's a major support level that has been holding for several weeks now, so something to be watching here in the near term. That's going to do it for today, guys. Just wanted to bring that midweek update. There are several and plenty of good trades and setups that are out there if you're looking for that. I did post an update on the nodeinsiders.com site today with a little bit of a watch list, some pullback entries to look at, some breakout setups to look at, and some of the stronger names that are running at this point. So for those of you that are subscribers to that, go check that out. That was posted just a couple of hours ago. Thanks for watching as always, guys. We'll catch you in the next one. Until next time, take care, everyone.